Okay, so welcome, Chad and Anna. Nice to see you too. I've watched a lot of your videos at this point, and it's nice to see your faces in person. So up to you who starts, but why don't you tell us a little bit about why it is that you decided to run for leadership of the Green Party of Canada? What brought you to this point?
This is paper rock.
We'll go in alphabetical order. Go ahead, Anna. Go ahead.
It's always a challenge with co-leadership. Who goes first? My name's Anna Keenan. It's a real pleasure to connect with the Nanaimo Ladysmith EDA today. I am a huge fan of Paul Manley's, and we've got to get that guy back into Parliament. He was doing such good work there and continues to do such good work now that he's on the outside, but I'm confident that he'll be back in Ottawa where he belongs. I'm connecting with you today from Ebiguit, one of the 7 districts of Mi'kma'ki. Ebiguit means cradled in the waves and is the Indigenous name for Prince Edward Island. I'll just do my sort of personal history to start with. You can probably pick from my accent. I am originally from Australia. I studied science and economics at university, and that was where I encountered the climate crisis for the first time through my scientific studies. And learning the science of climate change, I realized I was going to be faced with a choice. Do I go on and study to be a climate scientist and do a master's and honors year in science or PhD, all that sort of stuff? Or do I go a different path? And I chose to go a different path because I realized if I become a climate scientist, I'm just going to be one of thousands of climate scientists that they're already ignoring. And I realized that political change was where I wanted to invest my time. And so I began working for environmental organizations in Australia. I spent 5 years working for Greenpeace International in Amsterdam. I actually met my husband, who's from Prince Edward Island, at the United Nations climate change talks in 2007, which is the same place I first met Elizabeth May, an inspiring leader in Canadian green politics. And in the time since then, we moved back to Prince Edward Island. We moved back to Montreal first. Montreal was the city that welcomed me to Canada, and then moved to Prince Edward Island to live near my husband's family as Alzheimer's was starting to affect his parents, and we wanted to support them in that work. Since being on the island, I've been the president of the Provincial Greens, including in 2 years of very important growth where we established governance for the party, and we helped to move from having just one elected MLA, Peter Bevan Baker, to having now a full caucus. And I ran a proportional representation campaign in 2016, have served on the board of Fair Vote Canada, and I've run in the last 2 federal elections, including getting 26% of the vote in 2019, which I was pretty proud of shortly after receiving my Canadian citizenship. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. After the last election, I had people saying to me on election night in 2021, Anna, we want to see you running for leadership of the federal party. And it took me a while to be convinced that that was something I should do. But seeing how I had supporters both in Prince Edward Island and all across the country keeping on contacting me, I thought if they believe in me, I should believe in myself. And I wanted to reach out to introduce the idea of co-leadership to the Canadian Greens. And I wanted to work with a Green from Quebec who has a much higher, a native level of French. I've worked on my French a lot this year, but it's going to take me a few more years to reach a native level. And I asked around the Quebec Greens, and they kept pointing me in the direction of this fabulous human, Chad Walcott. So we've been working together since February. I'll pass it to Chad.
Yeah, and I apologize in advance for the background noise and sharing the space because this is the best place for the internet. Yeah, I met Anna. Well, I guess Anna and I had known each other a little bit in the various Green Party spaces online, and even early on, I sensed that we aligned on many topics. So when she approached me in February to join her in this co-leadership adventure that we're embarking on, I was immediately intrigued because co-leadership is something I believe in. It's something I wanted to help bring to the Quebec Greens should the opportunity have presented itself. But at the time, initially, I had just gotten engaged. We had just bought, our first home, and I was like, I don't know if this is exactly the right time for this. But we got to speaking. We went through a 2-week conversation where we both vetted each other and really got to know each other, and found out that we really do align on many of the important topics. And so the first of which being the need to renew the Green Party and the need to move towards a co-leadership model. So I hopped into the race with her. So my name is Chad Walcott. I'm joining you from Montreal, the traditionally known as Tiohtià:ke, which is a traditional meeting space for many Indigenous peoples here in Quebec and Montreal. My background is a little bit different. So I started off working with kids, like just in summer camps for about 4 or 5 years. And that really opened my eyes to the importance and the impact that someone can have in a community, and the importance of inspiration in motivating people to take action and follow a lead, basically. And I took those lessons, and when I got to university, that's when I was really exposed to my first kind of political environment and my first political campaigns, where I got involved with the student government. And this was at a time when Quebec was mobilizing against proposed tuition increases here in Quebec. So they were planning to go 75% in 5 years increase to match the rest of Canada. And that sounded all well and good for some, but the reality here in Quebec is that would have excluded a lot of people from being able to seek higher education. So I was mandated with mobilizing students around that issue, and really got a firsthand experience of the impact of an informed and engaged student body, but we can transpose that to an informed and engaged citizenry. And I took those lessons with me in everything that I've done since. So after leaving university, I got involved and in fundraising for the Jewish General Hospital here in Montreal, helping individuals raise money for cancer and Alzheimer's research. After that, I went into working for a small marketing firm where I was tasked with building a nonprofit whose mission was to spearhead an initiative to revitalize a neighborhood in Montreal that was an old manufacturing district. But when manufacturing went away to overseas in the 90s, the district fell into disrepair, and the businesses that were really suffering up until this point. And I was happy to say that in a 6-month period, we were able to bring together stakeholders, bring together the city, bring together everything, and really launch an initiative that has since taken a life of its own and succeeded in revitalizing the neighborhood, but also succeeded in changing what was going to be a vacant lot that was going to be used for like a factory yard, essentially, and turned into a multi-purpose park space that the community can now use for events and all kinds of stuff. So after that experience, I actually ran in 2018 with the Quebec Green Party and achieved the second highest score or result for the party in the province. And then after that experience, I joined the City of Montreal. I started working for the City of Montreal, where I was advising residents on how to navigate the bureaucracy here in Montreal, but also advising the local politicians on issues of social and economic development, on leisure and sports, and even public works. So I really got a good lesson in how government works and how government can work for individuals, and how to teach regular citizens how to make the government work for them. So I joined the Green Party of Canada in 2019 and became the president of my EDA, where I served up until this point for the past 2 years. And our motto has always been to try to lead by example within our community and try to help citizens, kind of the similar work I was doing for the city, help citizens move their initiatives forward and have a positive impact. So I'm really excited at the opportunity to run with Anna for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada. And we want to bring about generational change that is necessary. We want to bring the party to the next level by empowering our EDAs and empowering our members to be leaders in their community, and really lead through leading by example and through empowering all of our members. And it's really excited at the opportunity and really happy to be here to share our vision with you all.
Awesome. Quite a story you guys both have. Thanks for that. I really appreciate what you said, Anna, about just being another climate scientist who's being ignored. I'm actually a biologist myself, and I've gone from biology to politics. I relate to that a lot. So I just one other piece of format I forgot to mention to everybody, which for the recording, I've realized we weren't recording when I announced what territory I was broadcasting from. It's the traditional Snuneymuxw First Nations territory. We're going to be doing about an hour and a half. I'm going to allow you two to do your closing remarks, and then we can stick on for another half hour if folks have additional questions. Because I figure about an hour and a half is most people's limit, but there might be some folks who have some really, really burning questions they want to ask. So we'll just cut right to the first question that we've prepared for you guys. Despite being a country that is seeing some of the greatest temperature changes on Earth from climate, as you know, the Arctic is warming 4 times, I think is the latest number, as fast as the rest of the world. Canada on the whole is about 3 times as fast. Despite that, Canadians are less concerned on average about climate than other developed nations, which is disheartening to me. So how do we bring climate and its other associated environmental issues to the front of Canadian minds again to make this a more pertinent issue for folks? And this is 4 minutes, so you guys, between the two of you, have 8 minutes to answer.
Perfect. So interestingly enough, I saw a poll today that came out by Polling Canada that shows that 88% of Canadians actually believe that climate change is a crisis versus 7 who don't and 5 who are still unsure. I think perhaps the perception that Canadians aren't as concerned about it comes in 2 phases. One, because we don't like our winters, I guess, and we feel like it might be better for the temperature to be a bit warmer to counteract that. But more seriously, I think there are other issues that are competing for top of mind for Canadians, like inflation, like the health crisis we're facing, like the housing crisis we're facing. And I think the approach that we want to adopt to bring climate to top of mind for Canadians once again and really get solid action on climate is to show Canadians that the issues, the multiple crises that we're facing as a society, and including the climate crisis, are actually interrelated. And we, in our approach, want to really approach climate in an intersectional way and show that not only can we address climate justice issues, but we can address social justice issues, as well as economic issues and obviously housing and health. So one of the main drivers of the current inflationary, crisis that we're having right now is our dependency on fossil fuels, right? So one of the main things Anna and I want to tackle as leaders and with the Green Party is having a planned transition away from fossil fuels and placing Canada as a leading force in renewable energies. And part of that planned transition, sorry, there's a train going by, so that's the background noise you're hearing. But part of that planned transition is working with workers in the fossil fuel industry to retrain them and bring them in to as leaders, really, in building a renewable energy economy that can place Canada at the forefront of that industry. I think it's more than time for us to move away, and we also need to be bold in regulating our oil industry and our fossil fuel industry, and not be afraid to tax oil companies who are making record profits at a time when Canadians are having trouble paying their basic bills, and use those extra funds to reinvest in addressing some of our other crises, like our housing market crisis at the moment. Canadians are facing an ever-increasing housing market, price in housing markets. There's a massive homeless problem that is spreading across our country. We see it here in Montreal, we see it in Toronto, and we're really seeing it in Vancouver, where entire blocks have turned into 10 cities. So we need to tie these things. We need to make that transition, and we need to be bold in how we manage not only our resources, but the companies that exploit our resources. So I'll stop there and let Anna take over, and we'll tag team on this one.
Cool. When I go door to door on Prince Edward Island, I repeatedly get that climate is one of the highest issues. You know, yes, the healthcare crisis, yes, the economic crisis, but also people are thinking about climate change all the time. And I think that that's only accelerating. I understand that you're all, you know, breathing in wildfire smoke this evening. People in the lobster industry here on PEI are acutely aware that the forecasts say the lobster population is moving further north. And if that continues in 25 or 30 years, there's going to be a collapse of their industry. So people are deeply aware of this, but people avoid thinking about it because they believe that solutions, they don't believe that solutions are possible, because no politician has presented a clear and logical plan that says this is how we're going to get results. I think there's a lot that we can learn about addressing the climate crisis from the way that the COVID crisis was handled. You know, we had suddenly it wasn't politicians talking about it, it was our chief medical officers of health who were giving the public regular briefings on what the situation was and what the progress was towards a solution. And I would like to see the same thing. I would like to see Canada's, you know, chief climate scientist regularly briefing the public on these issues and saying, okay, our biggest source of emissions is the oil and gas sector. These are the plans that we have to decrease carbon emissions within that sector. Our second highest sector is transportation. So here's the progress that we're making on active transportation, on public transportation, on electrifying our vehicle fleet. These are how we're going to make sure that the rebates and subsidies don't only benefit the wealthy as they have in the past, but how they can be available to all. You know, our transition in our agriculture sector is also necessary. We know that animal agriculture is a very significant contributor to the climate crisis. We know deforestation is a contributor to the climate crisis. So looking at each of these sections, and this is where my very logical, scientific Cartesian brain comes in, looking at each of these sections, what is the carbon budget and what is the progress that we're making? And then how can we look like we looked in COVID to other countries, and we saw, okay, you know, Italy has used this particular protocol. The studies show that it's getting results. We should be looking at what the UK has done, for example. In the last 20 years, their economy has grown, but their emissions have decreased by half. In the same time, Canada's emissions have been flat. We have the same emissions now as we had 20 years ago. So what is it that is working in the UK? What is it that worked in Germany to lead the energy revolution there and increase uptake of renewables? We know it, it's feed-in tariffs at the national level. So why can't we take those policies that are working in other places, copy paste, adapt them to the Canadian situation and apply them? I think the current government does a lot of rhetoric and not results on climate change. They govern by press release. They're always saying that there's climate action, but they're never actually proving that they're getting results. And you can see that in our national emissions profile. So I really think if we can present a clear and logical plan to Canadians, they will engage in this issue.
Great answer, guys. Yeah, I think policy definitely directs opinion on a lot of this. I did want to clarify, I got that number about concern from an actual study I looked at recently, because I was concerned about this. It was an Ipsos poll, and it showed that 34, so they surveyed 31 countries, and within Canada, it was 34% worry a great deal / a fair amount versus 48% as a global country average out of all the 31 countries they surveyed. So yeah, but yeah, absolutely great answer, guys. So this is a big question, and this is one that's actually very dear to my heart, having followed all of the what I would view as misinterpretation by our previous leader of this question. What do you think is the role of party leader within the Green Party of Canada? And this is a 5-minute question, so between the two of you, you've got 10 minutes.
Cool. I can kick us off. Yeah, we're sort of alternating who starts roughly. I believe, and I think most of the members believe as well, that the primary role of the leader is to be the spokesperson for the party's agreed policies. And the policies come from grassroots policy processes in the membership. It's the responsibility of the leader to know those policies back to front and find ways to effectively communicate them to the Canadian public. I don't think that's where the role stops. I think we also need to be responsible for inspiring participation, whether that's inspiring volunteers to participate, inspiring donors to donate across the country. We're not the only people responsible for that, but inspiration and giving people the sense that if they engage with the party, they can make a difference is a key role of the leader. Supporting candidates, of course, taking a very serious role in party governance as a member of the Federal Council and Executive Council is very important, and modeling the sort of culture that we want to set in the party as well. We were just on a call a few hours ago with our volunteer team, and we spoke very much about how we believe that a culture within any organization is really initiated at the top of that organization. If your boss in a business tells you, oh, you should all practice self-care and make sure you're taking enough breaks and like take your holidays. But in practice, they're working 60-hour weeks. They never take their holidays. They're stressed out all the time. It's more important what they do than what they say. And Chad and I have a really strong emphasis on personal sustainability. You will see us taking breaks. You will see us going to sleep early. We're not going to burn ourselves out. We believe that we all need to be able to sustain our engagement in the party. And that hasn't always been the case within the Green Party in the past. There's sort of been a bit of an urgency mindset where we're all expected to burn ourselves out in service to the goals. But I think if we're serious about the value of sustainability, we need to apply that to our internal leadership as well. So that cultural modeling, I think, is another really important role of the leader. I'll let Chad expand upon some of these.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. So I think one of the kind of main themes in our leadership bid, and if should we be elected, will be one of the main themes of our leadership, is really leading by example. I mentioned it off the top, but it is something that we hold dear to our hearts and a principle we try to live by. And part of that for me is the principle of leading from behind, right? This is a principle I came crashing into when I was in student politics, because I was always raised, leaders lead from the front. And I have to say, back in that time, I did have a more of a, I guess, enemy Paul mindset of leadership, but that I was disabused of that notion at the time. And I really learned the value of setting a direction for the party, right? The role of the leader is to embody and foster green values. And so Anna and I would like to set a direction of where we want to send the party, but then empower our members to take the lead in how we get there, and trust our membership and trust our councils and trust, our EDAs to agree to follow the path, yes, but also to find the best way for themselves to get there, right? We're not here to dictate policy. We're not here to dictate how we get to the destination that we're going to. We're simply here to create a consensus about where we want to go and facilitate and empower our members to get there through the means that work for them. There's no one size fits all solution to any issue in a nation as large as ours, in a country as large as ours with so many different regions. So we want to empower individual members, individual EDAs to really take initiative in policies and in initiatives and projects that they see that are important to them and drive them forward. And in that spirit, we need to create and promote opportunities for participatory democracy. We need to create structures within our party to allow for people who are coming into the party to find their space, find their group, and flourish, right? I think a leader has a responsibility to build trust within the institutions of our party. And I think, the crisis that we've just gone through, but the crises that we've been going through as a party are deeply rooted in a lack of trust for the institutions that are leading our party. And it's a shame, because there are people who are very dedicated and very devoted to advancing the interests of the Green Party of Canada. But unfortunately, because of rumors, because of misconceptions, they're criticized nonstop. And we think the role of the leader is to shed light on the good and on how hard people are working and move forward together. And we think that's how we will inspire growth within the Green Party. You know, in investing in our EDAs, in showing people that they can be the change that they want to see, and show them how, by giving them the tools, we can inspire long-term growth in our membership, and that growth will in turn help us grow our financial and improve our financial situation in long term, and hopefully inspire people to remain active and engaged with our party. Because as I mentioned off the top, there's so much power in having an active and engaged citizenry, and we have to tap into that. And I think as the Green Party, and we think as the Green Party of Canada, we have so much potential to tap into, and we really want to look forward to building that. And ultimately, through doing those things that Anna and I have mentioned, the role of leaders to set the party up for success. And again, not through top-down dictating of how things are supposed to be or how we want things to be, but rather by emulating the values and the habits that we want to see in our membership, and giving them an example to follow in a way that they see fit.
Great answer, guys. I liked all that. I was supposed to stay neutral as an interviewer, though, so I'm probably going to say that to everybody. I think everyone's got great answers. That's what happened in the last time we did these. Everybody answered all the questions wonderfully. It was a hard decision to make, you know. So we'll move on to the next one here, and this is a bit of a, I'd say a bit more of a technical question in my opinion. We suffered a huge loss in the last election. As you guys know, it's the worst performance that we had since 2000. Abysmal, really. What do you two view as the most important steps in regaining share of the vote, rebuilding trust, getting members, getting public support? There's a lot of approaches that we could take to this. I'd really love to hear what your guys's are.
So I'll start on this one briefly, and I'll pass the puck to Anna after. So I think we need to rebuild the Green Party's credibility, for sure. We need to get our house in order. I think that's top of mind. But once we do that, we need to be investing, as we mentioned a few times, in our EDAs, right? I think a huge resource that we can tap into is our local involvement throughout the country. So first, we need to make sure that we're building EDAs in all 338 ridings, ideally. Maybe that won't happen over 1 year, but we have hopefully 3 years until the next election. So we want to invest and take the time to find leaders in those communities and help build as many EDAs as we can, and then give those EDAs the tools and the knowledge to be able to lead within their community, to be able to be impactful and be present. And I don't mean that in a sense of like, put on your green buttons and cape and hat and go and say, I'm the Green Party, and sign up members. No, I think we can give our members the tools to, again, simply lead by example and show their communities how to push initiatives forward, whether that be at the municipal level, whether that be on the provincial, and of course in the federal level. And when people then turn around and ask our members, you know, how do you know these things? How are you so knowledgeable about how to move forward these initiatives? They can be like, well, these are tools I gained within the Green Party of Canada. And I think that's how we rebuild our credibility, and that's how we create sustained growth for the party. And yeah, I think it starts with our EDAs, and I'll let Anna talk to the other points in our platform.
Yeah, sure. I want to build on the EDA point as well, because I know that people like Elizabeth May, like Paul Manley, like Mike Morris, like myself and Chad, a lot of the skills that we bring into campaigning, and that we've brought into our own district associations, our own electoral campaigns that have meant we've performed well, we've learned those skills from other organizations that we've worked with in the nonprofit sector, or from student politics, or outside the Green Party. And we want to make sure that if people are interested in Green Party policies, that they have an opportunity to learn those skills inside the party, because I think that's the only way we're going to get to a point of having a caucus of 12, to have that official party status, that critical number. If we want 12 MPs, we need to be running full-scale campaigns in 60 to 100 seats across the country, because we can't pick and choose which ones we're going to win. That's left up to chance. It's left up to the voters. So to get to 60 or 100 district associations. We need to be thinking big. We need to be supporting the candidates who are stepping forward. I believe we have well over 100 like really excellent candidates in the last election. Yes, we have some ridings where there's just a paper candidate, but those excellent candidates need training, experience, support, and they need campaign managers and official agents who know how to do that work of campaigning as well. So mass campaign schools for anyone who wants to learn. I think that's how we get to success, not picking and choosing target to win ridings. We also need to give those campaign teams a long runway before the next election. In both of the last two federal elections, 2019 and 2021, nominations only happened like 3 or 4 months before the election. They could be happening 2 years out to allow strong candidates who have an intention to win to take that time to build their campaign teams, to fundraise, to raise, to raise money, to train volunteers, to get election ready, and to start being present in the community as the Green Party candidate for the next election. The earlier that we can get started, the earlier we can get out knocking on doors, the more ready we are going to be for any election. But I'll come back to the governance and the internal work. Our internal culture needs work. And I was really struck during all of the big internal conflicts of 2021. I would go from, my world in my computer of watching internal politics in the Green Party, crumbling, and it was very depressing. And then I would go and watch my 6-year-old son's soccer game. And my husband was coaching this team of 6-year-olds. And I was just struck every time I sat there for an hour and watched their practice of how they built a healthy and encouraging team culture. There was this principle that the coaches put into practice, which is that you always praise your teammates in public. You always give them high fives and appreciation. And if you've got constructive feedback for them, if they've made a mistake, you don't you don't shit on your teammates. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. I'm Australian, but that happens sometimes. You don't dump on your teammates. You give them feedback and to say, hey, next time, maybe try it this way. And you give them that feedback in private and in the spirit of support. You don't publicly cut down your teammates. That creates an atmosphere of a total lack of psychological safety, where people are anxious, where people are worried about making mistakes all the time. And there's this sort of constant fight or flight reflex that's activated within the team. And I see that very actively in lots of spaces within the Green Party. So we need to tone that down, build a positive culture, treat each other like, the inner children that we are, with love and respect and encouragement and positive feedback. And I think that's how you build a strong team, whether it's a 6-year-old soccer team or whether it's a political party. Let's encourage each other and build that positive culture.
Wow, great answer, guys. I really couldn't agree more about both of those two overarching points. I will forgive the unparliamentary language this time if you're willing to apologize to the chair or whatever they're called, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, you definitely get booted for saying that.
There was a funny story about a former Prime Minister of Australia, and he was a former diplomat, so he would never swear publicly, but he was encouraged intentionally to swear on like a really sort of folksy news show where he was doing an interview, so that he would be more
relatable,
appealing to the average Australian rather than this academic diplomat. Anyway, that's an aside.
Totally.
Get back to the questions.
Well, I swear a lot and I have to watch it, but I always bring to my defense. Apparently you appear more honest if you swear, or more genuine or something like that. It's like, I guess so. Cool. Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that about constructive criticism though, and about building up EDAs. There's been a dearth of both of those things, I would say, in my opinion. So next question. This is a bit of a shorter one. Sorry, did I just
Derek?
What just happened? I have way too many things plugged into my computer. Not sure what just happened there. Can you guys hear me? Am I clear here? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Not sure what happened at all. So if a by-election were to be called in a riding in Canada away from your home riding, in which we looked like we had a really solid chance of winning, would you be willing to move there and run in that riding? And when general election time comes, follow-up question to that, would you be willing to relocate to run in a more winnable riding if your riding that your home riding is not very winnable? So 2 minutes, so 4 minutes between the two of you.
Cool. So I guess I'll take this one first. So I'll start by saying I am confident that if elected leader, I would be able to win in my riding, despite the fact that traditionally my riding is a liberal stronghold. Mark Arnault has, to my knowledge, and been speaking about seeking retirement. So I believe that if he retired, I would have quite a good chance because of my involvement with the community to be elected here. That being said, if elected leader, I would consider moving to a different, more winnable riding if such a riding presented itself, whether it be in a by-election or a general election. The reality of myself and my fiance is that we don't have any children at the moment, and my fiance is able to work remote. And as the leader of the Green Party, I'd be able to relocate myself to a place that we thought we could win. That being said, I wouldn't be comfortable displacing a solid candidate in a winnable riding. I think, again, coming back to the principles of kind of leading from behind, if we had a solid candidate in a given riding that we believed we can win, I would rather wait to the general election to find a riding that I could win in rather than displace someone who is electable in their own right in their riding. And again, I think the objective is to have as many Green MPs present in Parliament as possible. And if it meant still being outside of Parliament as a leader, but we could assure that person won, I'd rather do that than kind of parachute myself into a riding where I don't necessarily have the connections just for the sake of being in Parliament. But short answer, yes. Long answer, it would depend slightly on the situation on the ground.
And for me, my answer on that is nope. I'm tied to Molpec. I've run here twice. My family is deeply rooted in this community. I have a 6-year-old son who's going to school here, and the last election, Molpec was the 4th strongest riding in the country for the Greens after Elizabeth and Mike Morris and Paul Manly. It was Anna Keenan in Molpec, and I believe it's an eminently winnable riding here. And so I am committed to running here. I also, like Chad said, we don't want to be the sort of leader where the election focus is all about electing us. For us, it's about electing 12 Greens. And if at the next election we elected 12 Greens and I wasn't one of them, I would count that as a success for my own leadership. And at that stage, I would probably step back and allow one of them to run for leader. But that being said, I think I can be among that caucus of 12 Greens, and I'd be very excited to give it a third go in this riding.
Well, it's great that you guys live in winnable ridings. Right on. Okay, so next question is about the economy. Right now, life seems super unaffordable. Cost of fuel for anyone who's not a diehard driving an EV, like lots of us. Food and all that, it's really, really high right now. Inflation has gotten a bit out of control, particularly it seems in BC. And we still are having issues despite this with basic government services. As you know, healthcare, you might be aware, healthcare is in a bit of a crisis right now in our province. So what do you see as the best means to tackle this issue? It's a 5-minute question, so 10 minutes between the two of you.
Thank you very much for this. And I will say inflation is high across the country, housing crisis across the country, the healthcare crisis across the country. These are common things in every single province. And when it's provincial jurisdiction, but it's happening in every single province, I see it as a federal problem. It's the way that we've set up our systems and our economy. And I honestly see the economic crisis that we have now combined with all of these cascading crises in other areas, healthcare, climate, environment, as it's a little bit of an I told you so from the green movement here. We've been talking about sustainability for decades and saying the neoliberal capitalist system is at its heart unsustainable. So the cost of living, the increases in that are really driven by, I see sort of three key areas where cost increases have been out of control. That's housing, the cost of gas and fossil fuels, and the cost of food and groceries. And so the solutions to inflation in each of those areas are different because the causes are different. In housing, the cause of inflation, like there's multiple studies that show it's largely the introduction of Airbnb and the financialization of the housing market, as well as underinvestment in public housing for the last many decades. And now we're stuck in this. I was speaking to a supporter earlier today, and he said, construction is like doing push-ups. Like if you haven't done push-ups every day for 10 years, you're not just going to be able to build. You're not going to be able to do 10 years worth of push-ups in a day. So we can't just build our way out of this crisis and expect it to be solved in a year's time or in 2 years' time. It's going to take time. And this is the result of decades of housing policy coming to roost. I remember when I moved to Canada, there was already concerns about housing prices. There was forecasts from experts that said this is going to get worse if we do nothing. And lo and behold, we've done nothing, and here we are. So I'm really appreciating, there are things we can do in the short term, like regulating Airbnbs, like regulation of real estate investment trusts, which is something Mike Morris is really championing at the moment, encouraging people to form housing cooperatives and making the knowledge about how to form housing cooperatives much more open. It's a bit of an opaque process for a lot of people. They don't understand it because it hasn't been popular. So those are some short-term initiatives, but then we also need to be taking long-term actions to get more people into the trades. Free tertiary education in trades, I think, is part of the long-term solution to the housing crisis, and proper zoning in our municipalities. I was so outraged the other night hearing Pierre Poilievre talking about how we need to get rid of the municipal gatekeepers and build intense developments near transit hubs. And how do you think that we can build intense developments near transit hubs in municipalities without proper zoning? And that's what municipal staff do. They're not gatekeepers. They are enablers of good urban planning. And so this malignment of or the maligning of municipal municipal governments, I just thought was incredibly offensive. Then you've got the cost of gas. So Greens have had solutions to this for a long time. The only reason the cost of gas is a problem for the cost of living is because we've set up our economy to be addicted to fossil fuels. There is no alternative if there is no public transport, if there is no way to safely cycle in your city, if there is only gas cars available at your dealership. But green policies can make those options available to more and more people. Again, not a short-term solution, but it's the sort of thing we've been talking about for a long time. And then in food, we've got relocalization of food networks. One of the reasons that we have very high inflation in our grocery prices right now is because we're reliant on global supply chains, which are being disrupted all over the world for different reasons. If there's a drought in California, where 1/3 of all of North America's tomatoes come from, then of course we're going to see inflation in the cost of tomatoes. If there's a war in Ukraine, where 1/3 of the world's wheat comes from, then of course we're going to see inflation there. And disruption is going to be a feature of the next 4 decades or 5 decades of life on this planet. And so if we want to be free from disruption causing inflation in our food prices, then we need to invest in relocalizing our agricultural supply chains. I live in an agricultural area that produces 20% of Canada's potatoes, pretty much right here in my riding as well. So many of you across the country might have PEI potatoes on your plate tonight, although I hope it's more local than that. But really investing in locally owned agricultural processing, in cooperative ownership that's owned by farmers, not agricultural industrial corporates that take profits out of farming communities, is another thing that I'm really passionate about. And I think it can help consumers as well to have access to lower cost food when global supply chains are disrupted. I'll let Chad take on the other half of the cost of living.
Thank you, Anna. So yeah, I think a big factor, a big vision that Anna and I have for the future of the Canadian economy and the future of, well, the Canadian economy as led by the Green Party, is implementation and the creation of an economy that's based more on well-being rather than simply profits and productivity, right? So we want to see the implementation of the basic minimum wage across the country. We need to rethink. Anna mentioned it a bit before, but she's from a more rural setting. I'm from a more urban setting. We need to rethink how we're building our cities to create more 15-minute cities. The cost of gas affects people so intensely because a lot of people have to transit 30 to 40 minutes to get from where they live to where they work. In an urban setting, that's untenable. It doesn't really make sense. Why can't we create 15-minute cities, for example, where you are able to go to the grocery store, you're able to work, you're able to do everything within walking distance, and or we invest in those cases where it's not possible, more active or public transportation, making those systems more affordable for people, and investing in networks that are efficient and effective in getting people to where they need to go quickly. We need to, Anna mentioned free education, so I won't go back into that. But I was at a talk yesterday, actually, and there was a local restaurant owner who, was singing the praises of the need to have a menu primarily based in locally grown produce and locally grown food that's available, whether it be, chickens, cows, vegetables and stuff. Essentially what their motto was is that they don't serve anything in their menu that isn't available within the greater Montreal area through local farms, family farms, and investing in those rather than, as Anna said, the industrial kind of farming complex. So we need to rethink and we need to relocalize our economies to reduce the cost of producing the goods, and then hopefully reduce the cost of consuming and using those goods. And we need to reduce the work week. I think we need to go much more towards a kind of, and again, this is in line with the well-being economy, a work week that allows for people to spend time with their families and spend the hard-earned money that they earn on things that they enjoy, and hopefully reduce the stress on themselves and by reducing the stress on themselves, hopefully reduce the stress on our healthcare system. The costs that we see, again, much like the problems with the environment, are interrelated, right? So if we're spending so much on healthcare, on pills, on medicine, on whatever, on gas, then we're missing out on our ability to spend on things, on our basic needs, right? And I think we do need to invest more in housing. We do need to invest more in affordable housing, because right now it's almost impossible to rent. So I feel like I'm rambling on. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit tired, but I think Anna spoke beautifully to the majority of our policy points.
Thanks, guys. Hey, no worries about being tired and rambling. I do it all the time. All of your points made sense to me. Yeah, this is super related to the next question here. And it's the shortest one we got because I think it's a pretty, yeah, we are in a bit of a housing crisis, a little bit more than a bit, I'd say. It's one of the most unaffordable places in the world to buy housing is in Vancouver. And I understand that this whole idea of like wanting to own your own home is kind of a dream that we've been sold, which isn't set in stone. It's like rental economy is totally a thing. You don't need to own your house to be happy, but a lot of people do. And I'm one of those folks, and it's not something that is looking possible at this point. So do you think that it's moral to use housing as an investment? It's a 4-minute question, 8 minutes for the two of you.
So I think the morality of it is certainly an interesting question, but we think that it's certainly important to be able to regulate the real estate market and really regulate speculation that happens in the real estate market. Because I know, having worked in the city here in Montreal, and I'm sure it's very similar issue in Vancouver and in BC, is like this these large companies that are going and buying up all the, let's say, condo real estate and either selling it as Airbnbs or flipping it and increasing the cost. But really, it's all just speculation. It's artificially increasing the cost of real estate and, you know, preventing people from being able to enter the housing market. You know, I was extremely lucky that circumstances just came together and I was able to buy my home that I like just bought it a couple of years ago, right at the beginning of this crazy like exponential increase in prices, right before it took off. Had I waited literally 2 more weeks, I would not have been able to buy anything. I'd still be renting, and even the cost of renting is becoming astronomical here in Montreal, and I know it's even worse in Toronto and in Vancouver. So we really need to put a stop to that and really make it very expensive for you know, real estate conglomerates or simply wealthy individuals who just want to buy a house to rent it, to have multiple commercial properties. So yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Housing is a right first and foremost, and it should not just be an investment. For sure, the Canadian dream, and kind of we'll call it the American dream as well, is to own your property and then pass on the wealth that generated to your family. And I think that's where the moral question kind of comes into play. I think that is okay, but once you start getting into the speculation market, once you start owning multiple properties just for the sake of owning them and amassing wealth that's disproportionate, you know, I think that's where we start getting into a problem. And yeah, I'll pass to Anna.
There are other sectors in which investors can park their money to create investment income that don't create additional negative impacts on the right of other people to own a home. And I think that's all the argument that you need for regulating the housing market. I don't believe that individual landlords are the villains in this problem. In this scenario, if they own like one additional house, a lot of people might have like bought their parents' house and rented out, or they're holding on to like 2 properties because they're planning a retirement. So I really appreciated Mike Schreiner's proposition from the Ontario Greens in the Ontario election, where they talked about having much steeper taxes on property ownership for third and subsequent properties, because it's really those real estate investment trusts that are owning hundreds of properties that are driving the problem, not individual homeowners of 1 or 2 investment properties. So I don't want to villainize individuals here, because an individual cannot cause a housing crisis, but it is a tragedy of the commons. And so we need to make social regulation where we collectively agree on what the rules of the game are going to be. If we look at Europe, they have, you know, I used to live in Amsterdam for 5 years. They have a much more tightly regulated housing market. They're still having problems. If you look at Austria, you know, they've been investing in high quality public housing for decades now. And like there are people who rent for their entire lives in public housing, but, you know, they're in apartment blocks that have you know, pools and gyms in them and shops, and they're just delightful places to live. And it's all public housing. And these are policy choices that we make. And I think if we had slightly more collectivist values instead of this individual competitive value in our housing market, that we could move Canada towards much better outcomes in the housing market. And I'll add here that even though the housing crisis really started in Vancouver and BC, it has leaked across the country in the past few years, I think all the way to Prince Edward Island. So we've got all sorts of people who east-sized their lives and have been, you know, moving from Quebec and Ontario to places like rural Prince Edward Island, where they could afford a home that was much less. And in this tiny province, I think housing prices have been increasing at something like 35% per year for the last 3 or 4 years, which is you know, the highest individual province in Canada. But we are only 160,000 people, so you know, it's problems in one part of Canada don't stay in one part of Canada.
Yeah, still a crazy increase. That's that's not sustainable. Great. Yeah, appreciate those answers, guys. Yeah, REITs, I didn't know they were so problematic. Paul was talking about them a bit when he was in the House of Commons. Actually sounded the alarm on that for me. So got a question from the chat here. So that's our main interview pre-selected questions done with. Well done. You guys made it through. We're moving on to audience questions, and we've got some other ones in waiting in the wings, just in case there's not a whole lot of action in the chat there. But we do have one from the audience. Do you see the lower population density of Canada to be a barrier to mass public transit options that you see more often, see in more dense European countries? And I'd like to add to that about cycling, because I hear very often that there's this argument about, oh, it's too spread out and it's too cold. Nobody wants to ride their bikes. So
Can
I
I
don't know.
take
We'll
this
say,
one?
yeah, we'll say I don't know, 8 minutes again.
Yeah. I used to, well, I was on the board of bike-friendly communities, Prince Edward Island. So I'm a big advocate for active transport. I used to live in Amsterdam. It is also a cold country, you know, a cold city. Copenhagen, very cold. Sure, not as cold as Winnipeg, but still, we have a large chunk of the year where the weather is perfect for cycling here. And like, if you're really diehard, you can cycle in -30. I've done it. It's fun. It's healthy. All weather cycling is a good thing. But it's about the infrastructure. We do have really high population density in our cities. You know, a city is roughly the same density, whether it's here or whether it's in Europe. But of course, we have these very large northern parts of our provinces that decrease the average population density per province. But with regard to mass transit, you know, 50% of the Canadian population lives in a straight line between Windsor and Quebec. And high-speed rail through there has been talked about forever, but like, let's get that done. Once we build that infrastructure, it is there forever. It will be serving that incredibly dense population that's in a beautiful straight line for 100 years to come. And that can replace so many air trips. We have already great public transport, rapid bus transport that's in many of those municipalities. So I think looking at where the low-hanging fruit in terms of revolutionizing our public transport systems are, I think high-speed rail is there, rapid bus transit is there. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities has been calling out for increasing funding to municipalities so that they can implement the climate solutions that they know are necessary. And that's been on the Green Party policy books for a very long time, doubling the Canadian Community Building Fund, it's called. And yeah, we are absolute champions for excellence in municipal design. I think that's like the transport revolution is one of the things that has most been neglected in the last few years by the Liberals and also by the Conservatives. They talk a good talk on it, but it's not happening on the ground.
Yeah, I'm really happy Anna mentioned that the rapid rail or the high-speed rail corridor. I was totally going to mention that. But to answer the question, I don't think it's a lack of density. I think it's a lack of action on our government's part, and a lack of boldness to go and build the infrastructure that we need to have these rapid transit systems built. I mean, in Montreal, we're lucky enough to have a quite progressive municipal government who's created the REV network. So it's the Réseau Express Vélo, so it's the express bike network. And that's a network that is cleared throughout the year. So people can bike throughout the city like 12 months a year. And many people do. There are a lot of winter bikers here in Montreal. But it comes back to what we were saying before, right? We need to be bold enough to make the investments to create the infrastructure. And when the infrastructure is created, the people will use it. And with anything, right? There's this term called NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyard. And you always, when you have innovation, you'll always hit NIMBYism. But if we push through it, people will adopt the lifestyles and the habits that will allow us to, expand our networks and and innovate our cities in particular to make more sense and to be more transportation conscious and transportation efficient. So I think, again, no, I don't think it's a lack of density within Canada. I think it's a lack of ambition.
I'm going to add one more thing. I get very, very nerdy about transport policy. And when I was in my final year of university, I did some mathematical modeling of public transport systems as well. And there's a lot of evidence that suggests even in rural areas, you can have effective public transport. In rural areas, it might look more like carpooling to a point that's on an intercity network. I'll use my local province as an example, but there are two cities, Summerside and Charlottetown, and there's like 5 towns on the way between it. And currently they just run a bus like 3 times a day in each direction, which is not practical for people to use. But there's a lot of evidence that says if you up that frequency so that it's coming every 20 minutes to the point where people don't have to check the schedule, then you get a large number of people saying, I'm going to leave my car at home. I'm going to save the $10 on gas, and I'm going to pay the $2 for the bus instead. I'm going to enjoy the free public Wi-Fi on the bus. I'm going to get some work done or listen to a podcast or just rest my eyes because I'm tired going to work in the morning. And they're going to use that system if it is more convenient for them. And convenience of public transport has a huge amount to do with frequency, even in rural areas.
I guess I'll just add a bit about biking since we still have a bit of time, I think. At the beginning of COVID, and I'm not sure if this was something that happened in all the major cities and all the cities in Canada, but it certainly happened in Montreal. It was impossible to buy a bike. There was unfortunately a decrease in the use of public transportation, but it didn't translate to an increase in the use of cars. It translated to a massive increase in the use of bikes to get around. And that's because we have a good network of bike lanes that we can use that is getting better. And so again, it just goes to show, like, if you build it, they will come. So we just need to have the ambition to build and invest in sustainable modes of transportation, active transportation, and public transportation.
Yeah, I appreciate that nerding out about transit policy. There's a YouTube channel I follow called Not Just Bikes, and yeah, so good. That's what I was thinking about when I added biking onto the question there. Yeah, one thing, Chad, that I find interesting about what you just mentioned about the increase in cycling during the pandemic is, I think that's got a lot to do with the free time that folks had. We talk about a 4-day work week, and I mean, when people have more time, they do the things that are healthier and better for community, and it's a lot of evidence that people are more productive when they work, far less than 8 hours a day. So yeah, all great stuff, guys. Really appreciate that. So got another chat question here. This is from my friend Jim Mason. Hi, Jim. How are you doing? What are your thoughts on the need for contraction of the human enterprise with necessary impact on both population and living standards? So sorry if that question's a bit opaque. It seems opaquely worded to me. I've chatted literally for probably 10 hours with Jim about this. So I'll just clarify what he's getting at is he views that in order to survive the wholesale crises that we've got in the environment, which he views as climate as just one of the symptoms of climate change, is just a symptom. He says that we need to contract humanity, and he thinks that the number may be to around somewhere like 1.5 billion. But regardless of population contraction, the key essence of the question is he thinks that we have to have a reduction in standard of living in order to survive. So it's a deep question, heavy question. Maybe it's a controversial question. I don't know. I've disagreed with him a lot on a lot of different points about this, but yeah, interested to hear what you guys have to say. And yeah, we'll do 8 minutes again for that. That's fine.
So one concept that I've heard a lot about in the last little while is this concept of degrowth, right? We, as Western society, we're kind of worship productivity, as I mentioned before, but we also worship perpetual growth and perpetual exploitation. And I think while I don't necessarily have the answer to like degrowth of population right? Nor would I know how to go about doing that. I guess that's like stopping having children, I suppose. But degrowth of our economy, right? Moving away from a system that worships constant expansion, I think is something we strongly have to consider. It has to be in the conversation. And it's obvious that like the Green Party alone will not be able to push that forward, and nor will we be able to get the necessary buy-in for everyone to do it. But I think it's an important question that we can certainly champion, is like, how do we rethink our economy, and how do we rethink our way of living that is more in line with conserving what we have, perhaps, right? And using the resources we have without necessarily finding a need to constantly expand and constantly grow. Whether that's, obviously there's a need to build more housing because there are the people there that are unhoused. So how do we do that in a sustainable way that makes sense and isn't in a paradigm of like urban sprawl or city growth, right? And certainly we need to put in check urban sprawl, and perhaps we need to build up rather than out, so we can save our ecology and our green spaces and our wetlands. So yes, it is probably a controversial question, but I think it's a controversial, any cutting edge, I guess, thought is controversial at first, but we need to engage in that conversation and find what is a way that we can engage in that conversation that is productive and puts us in a direction for improving our impact. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, this was a topic of discussion at the last general meeting of the party. There was a motion that I was actually very glad to see, that I imagine the questioner was not in agreement with, which was to repeal the Green Party's policy on restricting population growth or encouraging degrowth of the population. I think that there's a lot of evidence that shows that it's not the number of people, it is the consumption levels of the top 10% of incomes in the world that is causing the climate and environmental crisis. And the countries that are responsible for that top 10% of wealth in the world and consumption and environmental impact include countries like Canada, the UK, Australia, the US, New Zealand, much of Western Europe, these high materialist value countries. Aiming for global population reduction, I think, opens up all sorts of questions of I'll just say it. I think there are racial justice issues associated with that, and we need to not be heading in that direction. We see that 33 million people have just been displaced by flooding in Pakistan. This is not a country that has contributed to causing the ecological crisis, but they are the first affected because of decisions that our culture, this dominant culture in the West, has taken to say that our convenience and our lifestyle and our consumption matters more than the lives of generations of people in the global South. And I think we have a responsibility to deal with that. The way that we deal with that is not by restricting global population. The way that we deal with that is by, yes, talking about degrowth of our economy. And I've been so impressed with the bravery of Paul Manly when he was in Parliament to use the words degrowth. This is something that is not on the radar of any other political party. They're afraid to say it. And yet I think many people in our generation, under 40s, are looking at what's happening with the economy globally. And they're saying, this neoliberal capitalist high material consumption model is not working. It's not good for our mental health. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for our futures. It's not good for our communities or our well-being. And people openly talk about how we're in latter day capitalism, or the later stages of capitalism. This era is coming to an end. And so it's our responsibility now to build the next thing. And that next era of political thought is one where well-being is the focus, not GDP growth, where human connection is the focus and the goal, not material consumption and amassing of goods. So I think this is what it means to be green. And I think our time is coming as a party. The values that we have held for a long time are just coming into the fore, and it's the right time for the party to be rebuilding, because green values are needed now more than ever.
So I keep struggling to get my mouse over to the unmute button there. Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to let you guys know something about, I don't know if you've encountered this, and I think it's a great thing for everybody to know who's watching, about the correlation between educating women and girls in developing nations and population. For the longest time, when I heard about population control, which, like, you guys are absolutely right, like, it's not the size of the populations that's the issue, it's the amount that people are consuming, right? Everyone's seen that graph, and it just looks like this. it's like this almost, of
If
how
people
much.
haven't seen it, I think it's from Oxfam. You can look it up. It's like the consumption funnel. So
Yeah. So it's like the higher you are in terms of wealth, the more you're emitting in terms of carbon, basically, and it's just like a staggering exponential difference, So it's developing nations, and I've got a friend who's in Pakistan right now or is from Pakistan rather, and he's possibly facing deportation. I'm not going to say his name because maybe I'll get in trouble, but he's he's a climate activist, and it's just the reason everyone's going to figure out who this is. He's going to get deported because of his climate activism here in Canada back to Pakistan. I mean, if that's not climate injustice, I like literally a poster child for it. It's insane to me. It fills me with rage. Yeah, but I worked as a fundraiser myself. So I guess, Chad, you and I have a bit of background in common. And one of the stats when I worked for Plan International Canada, was that we would talk about, it was for every 4 years of school that a girl received in developing nations, they would have something like 5 fewer children or something just insane. Like it's almost like one child less per year. So if anyone's saying that you need to control population and they don't talk about education, they are absolutely being a racist. Or they're ill-informed and don't want to be. But so got another question here. Okay, my friend was trying to put this in, but she was bumping up against a character limit here. So this is also going to be a controversial one, and possibly more controversial. It's about Alex Terrell. So I'll just read word for word what she's written here. What did you do to stop the expulsion of Alex Terrell? Oh, there's 4 questions within this. Okay, so what are you doing to reinstate him? What is your opinion of the way a small unelected elite expelled him? What are you doing to change this, ensure the Green Party again becomes a lateral movement versus the typically whipped top-down political party the Greens sought never to be? So I don't know. We'll give 10 minutes for the whole thing. I don't know.
Sure. And if you don't mind, I'll go first on this one, because I know Alex personally, having run under his party back in 2018. So I'll start from the how do we make it more lateral. So I think we touched on that earlier. We do that by empowering our members and giving them a voice and ensuring that they're engaged and empowered to have an impact on the direction of our party. Anna and I recognize that there are multiple groups within the party that have differing objectives and differing priorities, right? We have our eco-socialists, we have kind of the intersectional progressives, and then we have our traditional environmentalists, right? And oftentimes these groups bump up against each other because, again, they have differing priorities and can't agree on which to go first, right? What we want to do is we want to bring all these groups together, find common cause, and push forward on issues together, but without preventing any one group from having their say and having their impact on party policy. So that's how that's our vision for lateral growth of the party. In terms of Alex Terrell's expulsion, we weren't involved in that decision. I'll speak for myself and I'll let Anna speak for herself. I took no part in stopping him from being expelled, and I don't think it was the wrong decision. Perhaps that's a controversial stance, but the evidence that was presented to council was sufficient for them to decide to expel Alex. And having, again, ran with Alex in 2018, and myself was expelled from the Green Party of Quebec for attempting to create local associations and attempting to bring about the democratic processes within the party. I didn't really feel anyway about him being expelled. I didn't think the timing was correct. I think I don't think it was absolutely necessary, but I'm not sad to see him go, unfortunately. And I'm sorry if that's controversial, and I'd love to engage with your friend one-on-one. If they wanted to get in touch with me, they can reach me on our website. But I think that if you use your platform exclusively to attack the Green Party or attack the party that you're supposed to be a member of, then it's normal that you lose that membership. And at this point, I believe Alex had an appeal to the OAC, and had they made a recommendation to council to reinstate him, we probably would have heard of that by now.
Sorry, what's the OAC?
The Ombuds Committee, Ombuds Appeals Committee, yeah. So they reviewed the appeal, I assume, and Alex is still expelled to my knowledge. So I guess I'll leave it there. But I shed no tears about it.
Yeah. I will only add to that, Chad has direct experience. I've never met or had a conversation with Alex Terrell. I've only encountered what he's said on social media, really. But I do have faith that our federal council has done an immense amount of work over the last 18 months to solidify our internal party processes. And I believe that their decision here was the correct one. I think that Alex has also, since his expulsion, he's been driving a narrative that he's been expelled because he's an eco-socialist. I don't think that is the case. There are thousands of other eco-socialist members of the Green Party of Canada, and I'm glad to have them all in the party. This is a language that I speak. It is something that I support. We also speak the language of the intersectional progressive groups within the party and the classical environmentalist groups. We want to bring all of these groups together to do good work. But there are multiple articles out there stating that the exact and quite specific reasons that decision was made, and I support our federal council in having made that decision. I think it was well considered.
Okay, thanks guys. I'm going to avoid commenting on this in case I get pilloried by someone for agreeing or disagreeing.
I imagine that now we've said that on the internet, man, it's gonna blow up for us. We're gonna get a lot of hate on social media tonight, but that's
Possibly.
what the leader is all about, right? You've got to say it like it is.
Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. My position is well known, anyways.
Oh, there you go. Next question we got here. How this one is a lot less controversial, so you guys can relax. How important is it for the federal Green Party to cooperate with the provincial Green Parties, and what will your approach be as leaders going forward to that cooperation going forward?
Super, super important. It's vital. And I think should we be elected as leaders, or as should one of us be elected as leader and appoint the other as deputy? That's how the Constitution works right now. Within the first days, the first phone calls are to the leaders of provincial parties. Within the first month, we are placing phone calls and building relationships with every elected Green across the country, from municipal to provincial to federal levels. And this relationship is critical. I also know that most of the provincial and municipal Green parties have actively distanced themselves from the federal party over the last few years because of our federal chaos and unpredictability. And if they are seen to align too closely, they perceive it as and I think they probably accurately perceive it, unfortunately, as too big a risk for their reputation. And so they've needed to keep strategic distance. And I think that's a real shame. So I don't want to force, I'm very into consent and I don't want to force, provincial parties to ally with us publicly. I want to do the work to build up the federal party to be a worthy ally that is a strategic advantage for provincial parties to align with. And that's going to take many months, I think, of rebuilding trust and starting to prove ourselves again to the Canadian public, to see our polling numbers start to go up, to show that our governance is restabilizing, to show that we are a going concern, and that that collaboration will be mutually beneficial. Before that point of where they feel like they can publicly align, I hope that we can be getting a lot of advice and support from the parties. I think the Ontario Greens are doing amazing. Sonia Firstenow in BC is doing incredible work. Peter Bevan Baker, David Kuhn, like the New Brunswick and PEI Greens are just rocking it. And if they can share some of their secret sauce, if they can give us tips, if they can say, talk about these issues, stay away from these right now, help us to define our current political priorities, I think that would be a big help for the Federal Green Party to really achieve the rapid growth or the regrowth and the recovery and the renewal that we need to.
Yeah, I think just to build just slightly on what Anna was saying, I think if we have strong provincial Green parties, then we can have a strong federal Green Party in those regions as well. And yeah, I'm excited to hopefully rebuild those links. And I don't think we should adopt like the NDP model where it's actually just one party at all levels. I think the independence and the diversity of tactics and the diversity of approaches is important. But if we can coordinate more and share resources and share knowledge, then I think there's a lot that we can do.
Great. I appreciate hearing that. Oh,
can I actually ask there? I know that in Ontario, the federal ridings and the provincial ridings have exactly the same boundaries. Is that the case in BC? No. Okay.
No, not even close. And we're getting a redraw, I think, of federal here.
Yes. Yeah, we're all getting a redraw of
yeah,
the federal
right.
riding.
Federal, it would be everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, in Nanaimo, where I am specifically, it's divided into 3 ridings, actually. Whereas the federal one cuts off the northernmost and southernmost ridings by about half. So it's a sort of overlap. It's, makes campaigning a bit weird.
And the reason I asked that question is because, right at the start of this interview, we talked a lot about investing in our district associations and having the Green Party of Canada being a huge training resource for how to campaign, how to do voter ID, how to do meaningful connection with community, to develop trust, to be able to win elections. And I think those skills are directly transferable from the federal context to provincial or municipal context. That the techniques of campaigning are the same, and if we can build up our district associations at the federal level, that is going to be an absolute gift to municipal level parties as well, or to provincial level parties.
I could not agree more. Having been in 4 campaigns now, electoral campaigns, it's blank slate from the beginning, learned by doing. And if we could have, like, even if there was like a little handbook, or some webinar series, it would be massively helpful. And from my experience, I had like the people in the riding north and other ridings, they'd be asking me and my partner Alicia, fiance now, sorry babe, asking us repeatedly, like, can you come up and help out with this, or what do you do for this, or like walk us through all this. And it was like, it'd be in the middle of election time, and it's like, it's literally the worst time to do this. EDA is so important.
Yeah. And I want to add one tiny thing here. Sorry, I'm taking us somewhere else. But when I was at Greenpeace, we ran a mass training program there. And I have to say, it's so much more than webinars. This was like pre-pandemic, when everybody knew about how to use Zoom. But we can use technology to create not just webinar sorts of learning, which is really like, a one-to-many broadcast sort of learning. We can use technology to create online classrooms and project groups and like interactive relationship building learning. So it's not just isolated individuals, but we're building community across the country at the same time. And we're also building local teams at the same time, and putting the learning into practice. It has to be experiential education, where you're learning it in theory and then you're implementing it in practice the next week. And that's how we're going to build the skills.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to jump in here too, because you talked about the manual. It's funny because we actually developed the manual here in the NDG writing and my writing for our EDA. And it's more to give people the bare bones of how to, what the structures are, what these structures mean, how to use them. But there's another project that some of the Quebec Greens are talking about, Quebec Federal Greens are talking about doing, and it's just what Anna said and what you're suggesting, is like this idea of green university, right? So how do we make a curriculum that's shareable and expandable throughout the country? So fun projects to continue working on.
That's great. It gives me a lot of confidence and hope seeing you two talk about this issue like that. Really appreciate that, because it is, I know how much of a detriment it's been for a lot of people who really see, like, they've got this pain, like, we're in crisis, we need to get green MPs elected, and then they go and do it, and it's just, they're just guessing and making things up. So apologies to everyone in the audience. We're nearing 8 o'clock here, and we didn't sort out our plan in the back end here exactly about how we'd go about this sort of soft close for the double interviews. So I'll ask you guys one last super short question here and let you lead into your closing remarks, and then it's the soft end of the interview. If anybody else has any questions they want to ask, feel free to ask them, and I'll ask them to Anna and Chad after they say their closing remarks. If there's no more questions, though, we'll end the interview there. So last question before the soft close here is, if you became the leader of the party, you'd be expected to spend a lot of time in Ottawa. Is that something your family and you are ready for? A lot of commuting.
I guess I can go first. Or you want to go first, Anna? I don't know.
Well, you're much closer to Ottawa. It's just a 2-hour drive for you.
Yeah. So
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess, as Anna just said, Ottawa is pretty close to me here in Montreal. Luckily, my fiance's family is actually based in Ottawa, so not even that far from Parliament. So it would not be a problem for me to go to Ottawa at all. And I think that's one of the benefits of co-leadership. Should we be elected co-leaders, we can share the responsibilities. I have the proximity to Ottawa, and if Anna needs to be there as quote unquote first chair, then she can stay with me or my fiance's family, and sharing resources.
Yeah, we did our campaign launch in Ottawa, and we got to hang out at Chad's like future in-laws, sort of in-laws to be, and that they were very gracious in hosting us there, which was really delightful. Top line, like, yes, my family is ready. I do have a 6-year-old son. He's in 2nd grade here, and so there is family logistics to sort out. But as I mentioned, I met my husband at the United Nations Climate Change Conference. He is very committed and supportive of this work that I'm trying to do to change the world. And I'm very supportive of his ambitions. He's a small entrepreneur, runs a really great craft cidery, makes the best apple cider in Canada, I think. But we support each other, and he's excited that I'm trying this adventure. We'll figure it out. Oscar is excited about, my son, he's excited about visiting Ottawa. He'll probably see his cousins in Montreal a lot more, and get a little bit of a taste of the big city. We live on a 90-acre property out here, so he does like visiting a big city. It's a big adventure for him. And you're muted.
Press it 3 times here. I'm trying to do the keyboard thing. Anyway, the whole thing sounds like a big adventure to me. I've been informed we got 2 other questions in the audience here, but we'll do as according to the schedule that we got here. So I'll let you guys say your closing remarks. I'll let everyone know when the next interviews are, give a reminder, and anyone who wants to jump off, because I know it's been an hour and a half at this point, can do so, and then we'll finish up with those last couple of questions. So yeah, thanks for coming on, guys. Really appreciate the time. You're both very well spoken. Appreciate that. You've got great policies and all that. So any final words to anybody, to everybody?
I think it's not us that has the great policies, it's the Green Party of Canada that has the great policies, and our role is simply to communicate that in an accessible way that's inspiring and practical to people. What Chad and I are offering is solid experience in governance and hands-on experience doing the grassroots work of politics. We think that that is the leadership that's needed at this time to take us to the next level. I believe that organizations need different styles of leadership at different times. You know, the sort of leader that will take a startup out of the basement and into their first office is different to the sort of leader who will move it from their first office to being, you know, a national scale company. And I think that's an analogy for I think what we need in the Green Party of Canada right now. We represent generational change, a fresh face, a fresh voice, a new start for the Green Party. And I think that's the story that Canadians need to see from our party at this stage. So I really hope that people have liked what they've seen tonight. I encourage people to check out our website, www.keenanwalcott.ca. And I hope that everybody has verified that their memberships are active, because tomorrow is the membership cutoff if you want to participate in the first round of voting, which is in mid-October. And I also have to give a pitch for donations. A lot of people are seeing Chad and I as the underdogs in this leadership race. And we did get pretty strong first week fundraising results. But the second week of fundraising was always going to be harder than the first week. So if there's any Nanaimo Ladysmith donors out there who've been inspired by us tonight and would like to chip in, please just click that donate button on our website, and hopefully that'll help to pay for our brilliant campaign manager's time, who's actually from BC, as well as our tech and our calling systems. And then if we get enough money, we'll be able to travel out to BC and meet you all in person as well. I'll hand over to Chad.
It's funny because I usually do the marketing pitch, but it's a nice change of pace here. Yes, thank you everyone for your time and for joining us this evening. Evening for you, I guess. It's starting to get late night for us. But yeah, we think we're in this because we believe in the Green Party. We believe that there's still so much potential to bring to the fore. And we think most of all that the time is now for green values. Canadian politics is getting more and more volatile. We're suffering from so much anger in our society. We're suffering from so much division. And at a time of disinformation and division and disengagement and the rise of this like right-wing populism, the answer to that is the Green Party of Canada, we think. And we want green values to take a central role. We want to do politics differently. It's time to change our electoral system. It's time to be able to talk to one another again. And Anna and I are ecstatic at the possibility to be able to represent the Green Party at that stage and do the work to rebuild communities, to fight against disinformation, to empower our citizens to build the society that we want to see and that responds to the needs of the people. So once again, thank you all for your time, and we hope to come out to BC to meet you all sometime soon. So yeah.
Thanks so much, guys. Shout out to Ryan. I know Ryan. He's a good dude. Great. So last bit of housekeeping before we do the soft close and last audience questions here. We are doing these every Tuesday with all of the other leadership teams. Next Tuesday, they start at 6:30, all of them. The double ones go a little bit longer. The individual ones are just an hour. Next week on Tuesday, the 13th or the 20th, it'll be Sarah Gabrielle Barron we're going to be interviewing. The one following that, I don't know what day it is, 27th, I think, is going to be Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedneau. And then the one following that will be Simon Nocini Messier, or Messier Nocini. I do not speak French and I got the name backwards. Yeah, that's it. Thanks everybody for coming. If you got to get going, you can take off, but I'm going to ask the last couple of questions that we got from the audience here now. So do you see EDAs as a funnel of input in addition to election readiness? Not sure exactly what is meant by that.
I think I know what is meant by that. I think Chad does too. Go ahead, Chad. Yeah, I think I've taken it first.
Okay, sure.
Oh, input in terms of how to run the party rather than just helping the party. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So absolutely, EDAs are essential, right? There are eyes and ears and voices on the ground. The grassroots policies come from the EDAs. Well, they come from the members, but you know, if the system is functioning properly, EDAs are coming together and discussing these policies and drafting them and pushing them forward, as well as other groups within the party that are getting together. But EDAs are essential. They know their ridings best, and we have to keep them engaged between elections. It's not just about engaging them and kind of quote unquote turning them on every 4 years. They need to be active and meeting and engaging in the policy process 300, well, maybe not 365 days a year, we have to rest, but still on a regular basis between elections. They're the driving force of the Green Party, in my opinion.
And I know that council has been working on, or like a policy subcommittee of council has been working on what they're calling the continuous policy development process. The word continuous scares me a little bit because I want to make sure that there's like clear and predictable phases when people can engage and then not engage in the process. But I would love to see a predictable annual cycle in which EDAs know, okay, it's spring now is the time for us to be voting on policies at an AGM, and then summer, this is a time for public engagement. Fall, maybe that's a time for preparing for a general meeting. I've got my cat now, I let him in the office, he was locked out for 2 hours. And in the winter, that's when we're bringing forward policy proposals that can then be voted on the next spring. So I want to set up Chad and I want to set up a predictable annual cycle. Our policy process has sort of changed every year because we've only had meetings every 2 years. And now we're moving to annual meetings, finally. And if we can start to set up a regular rhythm, we work with ecological wisdom and the natural seasons. This is an incredibly seasonal country with, summer and winter. If we can work with that and EDAs learn what are the best ways for us to input to that, I think we'll see a lot of leadership coming out of the grassroots district associations. They know that the issues on the ground, they know what the policy solutions are, and they can I think the way that we get the best policy is if it's grounded in community. So absolutely, I want EDAs to be a source of input. I want feedback. Chad and I are very open to feedback as leaders if it's given in that spirit of constructive critique or in the spirit of learning and helping to support us to be better leaders. I think we have had an unfortunate culture of sort of cutting down our leaders in the last few years. If you've got criticisms of us, we want to hear that, and we want to hear that so that we can better support you as well. So we'll always be open to listening and to feedback coming up from district associations.
Love that. There's a lot of people who come to me and ask, like, how do you make this? And I want to change this about the party, this about the party. And oftentimes I don't know who to go to, but cool. We got another audience question. I'm not sure this is backed up by any data that I've seen. But I'd love to hear if whoever asked this question, if you could provide some more context on where you saw this, unless it was just anecdote, something you've been seeing personally. How do you intend to combat the big shift to the conservatives seen in young people throughout Canada? I see it being the opposite way. As far as I'm aware, younger generation is typically more progressive. But yeah, question stands.
Oh, okay, cool. I guess I'll go with this one too. So I was actually reading up about this because we're trying to put out like weekly policy blogs, and the one I was working on was like youth engagement and the importance of youth engagement and representation in politics. And so I was doing a bit of research, and I found that this was an article that was put out in the 90s, but I think there's some truth to it still. Is that what kind of contributed to young people moving towards more progressive policies was kind of leftist populism, right? And like addressing societal issues, right? And nowadays, with what I was mentioning before, kind of this rise of disinformation, this rise of individualism, Pierre Poilievre is able to tap into the right-wing populist rhetoric that speaks to a younger generation who is frustrated and disillusioned. And he's giving them and Canadians simplistic solutions to very complex problems. And unfortunately, for whatever reason in our society, we've made talking about politics taboo, right? So we don't know how to engage in political discourse as well as maybe other generations. Or, we have the internet and we have all these things, and people are able to inform themselves, but they're also able to shut themselves in echo chambers of kind of the same stuff. So I think we are sort of seeing that there was, I've been listening to a bunch of Canadian podcasts, and they are talking about how Poilievre is able to go get young progressives even to join his cause because he's pitching solutions that are appealing to them. I think we can go get them back. I think they'll soon realize that the simplistic solutions he's pitching won't work. And I think, unfortunately, that'll make their disillusionment worse. But I think it's important that we go get them and bring them back and show them, hey, because I don't think it's about the right wing policies necessarily. I think it's mostly about the simplistic solutions and the feeling of, oh, if I join Poilievre and I support Poilievre, then maybe the things that I'm most concerned about will move forward. Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, the younger generations also, as I was saying before, are acutely aware that like the capitalist era is ending, and that these values of individualism are not working. And Poilievre has managed to capture a lot of young people by talking about the housing crisis, and like, yeah, people are frustrated about that, and absolutely they should be frustrated about it. But when they realize that the solution that he is pitching is, like, I've seen tweets where he very literally says, we want to champion deregulated capitalism. Like, that is a recipe for disaster. That is the thinking that got us into this problem in the first place. The solution is much more collective thinking. And so I think Poilievre is tapping into generational anger, but he's proposing the wrong solutions. I also think that young people are incredibly educated about the threat of climate change and the requirements of climate science. And once they realize that he is promoting expansion of the oil industry, he's promoting new offshore oil drilling. These are infrastructure projects that, if they go ahead, are going to be infrastructure that's there for the next 40 years until 2060, well after zero carbon is meant to be achieved. And there is no logical connection. And so if we can offer if we can show young people that we hear them, we empathize with the frustration. We are young people ourselves. We are frustrated. That's why we're in politics. The other parties are not offering solutions, but that we are offering effective solutions that build community and that make people's lives better. I think that we can bring those folks back. And I think that, as you mentioned, Derek, how much of this is an impression versus how much of this is actual fact is a really good question, because I think young people do tend to be progressives, and he's picking up, a populist fringe, but I don't think it's the majority of the millennials, and certainly not Gen Z. Gen Z is super woke, and all that Poilievre does is like diss the woke, but if you ain't woke, you're asleep.
Yeah, it's about
Anna Keenan quote: "If you ain't woke, you're asleep."
Exactly. But yeah, it's about giving people the tools, right, to affect the change and empowering them and showing them, you know what, you can. And it's not just this one leader that's going to have the answer for you. It's you have the tools. We just need to give them to you and show you how to use them. So I think that's, to answer the question of how do you go get them, I think that's how we go get them back.
Yeah. The person responded to the chat about where they heard that. They said it was on the CBC. The huge increase in the membership in the Conservative Party by young people for the new leader was reported on the CBC when Pierre won. So you guys are right on the money. It was about Pierre's populism and leaning towards Trump.
Yeah. I don't think it's hard for the Conservatives to have a huge increase in youth membership, because I think it was barely anything before. Right? So,
yeah. But
they got two new people. They increased it by double.
Yeah, Front Burner had a few good pieces on that, and I think maybe the Backbench on Canada Land had a couple of good pieces on Poilievre's impact on the youth.
Cool. Something I wanted to say. One of you two brought up that Chad, you were mentioning about how it's become. I just every chance I get to mention this about how it is that we've become so taboo speaking about politics, how it's become so divisive, is because we've lost the ability to disagree constructively. And there's a lot of forces in that, but the biggest one, there's a lot of evidence to back this up, is social media. It's the way these programs are set up, they play really hard on our negativity bias and kind of turn us into dickheads. So spread the word. Everyone should quit Facebook and Instagram and Twitter forever unless they change their programs to help us connect with people in a positive way and get offline, because it's, there's anonymity, there's all kinds of stuff into it. Can't help but recommend a book called Stolen Focus by Johan Hari. So I'll just say this out loud. Neil, you're listening. You say that's all the questions, but there was a follow-up to the Alex Terrell one. Did you miss that, or was that in there? I'm sorry, just 1 second. He's finding. There was one last thing maybe to ask here. Okay. Yeah, sorry, we're swaying back into this controversial territory for the last little bit here.
It's okay. Bring it.
She says the reasoning provided for eliminating him was his correct analysis of the Ukraine situation. So she views his analysis of the Ukraine situation as correct. So the Green Party does not allow criticism of itself. You need to provide the reasoning, she says.
Sure. So my knowledge of how this came to be in the first place was there was a motion signed by 38 EDAs in Quebec that were asking for a membership review for Alex. This was a unanimous motion. So Quebec has this, it's unique. It has this body called the AQPBC, in French it's Association du Parti Vert du Canada, or Association Québécoise du Parti Vert du Canada, but it's basically the Quebec wing of the Green Party of Canada, because there's no relation with the Quebec Greens, the PVQ. So this is made up of 38 elected CEOs of EDAs, and came together and discussed the issue of Alex Terrell, because we perceive Alex as an impediment to the Green movement in Quebec, if I can just be so blunt as to say that. His Ukraine stance, although he's amended it to be a pro-peace stance, was not a pro-peace stance at first. It was a pro-Russia stance. And I would invite you to go look up his original wording if you can. I don't know if he still deleted it. But that was one of the reasons. And there were many other reasons, including Alex's persistent need to openly criticize the Green Party of Canada in the press without ever trying the internal processes first. And what I would challenge the questioner, I don't know if you mentioned their name, but it's not really important. I would challenge them to go find an article that Alex is in where he has said one positive thing about the Green Party of Canada. We can agree to disagree on specifically the Ukraine thing, but coming back to what I said before, if you're, especially as a leader of a provincial Green Party, if you're using your platform to constantly bring disrepute to the Green Party of Canada in particular, because that's where we are. First of all, that's a violation of the Constitution. It's in the Constitution. If you brought the party into disrepute, it's a means by which you can be expelled. And Alex has done this over a number of years. Again, I don't necessarily think that the timing of the expulsion was correct. If he wanted to join the leadership race, I have issues with that, because there's currently a Quebec election happening right now. So it's like, are you the leader of your own party, or are you trying to be the leader of another party? Pick. And I don't think he would have done particularly well in the leadership race, but at the end of the day, council made a decision based on our constitution. And I think it was the right decision.
And I'll just back up there. Like, it's not a critique of NATO. Paul Manley is very critical of the role that NATO has played in the world. I share critiques of the role that NATO has played, and it was specifically wording around saying that Russia's demands were reasonable in the annexation of Crimea and their actions in eastern Ukraine, and for a member of the Green Party and a prominent a leader of the Quebec Green Party to name that these demands were reasonable. It was that Russia's demands were reasonable. I think that was a very damaging statement and is not appropriate for leadership of the Federal Green Party.
Yeah,
So
I did see that.
Have to agree to disagree there.
I did see those original comments saying that demands are reasonable, and I can imagine trying to say that to any of the Ukrainian diaspora, which we have a very huge population here. One of my best friends actually is of that diaspora. Great, so that looks like all of our questions, unless I know there's a bit of a lag, but I think we'll end it there because we're getting close to 8:30 here anyhow, and it's been you guys been sitting for a while, as have I, and it's not healthy for us. So thanks so much, guys. Again, for anybody who's still here, their website, you guys are keenanwalcott.ca. That's KEENANWALCOTT, 2 T's in Walcott, 1 N for both the N's in Keenan. Keenanwalcott.ca. You guys want volunteers, donations, you need help in every way you can get. I guess I'm doing the press second marketing piece for you guys. I don't know. But yeah, tune in next week. Wow, I sound like a TV reporter. Tune in next week, 6:30 p.m. on our YouTube channel again. We're going to be interviewing Sarah Gabrielle Barron. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I'm going to stop the live stream here, and we could do a little bit of follow-up ourselves if you guys want.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nanaimo Lady Smith. Thank you, Derek. It's been lovely to meet you.